use the front door.
Bow before the greatness of the...
Go on, beat it.
Woo, yeah, wow.
Hey everybody, it's Ron with Ron's Computer Videos. I want to thank you for spending time with us here today. I've got an amazing interview lined up. Let's go ahead, let's get right to it. He's a musician, an animator, and the creator of the genre-bending interactive music mind bender, Total Distortion, Mr. Joe Sparks. Joe, how are you today, sir?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. I can't wait to talk about, well, my favorite subject, me in general, but you know, computer graphics, all of it. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of your work, everything that you've done with Reactor and things that you did later with your company, Pop Rocket, and just the thumbprint that you've put on kind of Macintosh gaming and on like Flash animation and all of that. I figured this is going to be a great time. I brought my copy of Spaceship Warlock. I'll see if I can pass it through the internet for you to sign. Thank you, sir. But no, it's this is such an important part of like my gaming history. I just wanted to say thanks again. So,
oh, great.
All right. So let's get into it. Joe, music has been such a constant thread in your career. What inspired you to become a musician? And maybe what was the first instrument that you played?
Well, piano, keyboard, and still to this day, I use a keyboard, although that's changing rapidly as the tools evolve. But so I was, you know, it was in church that I was a singer and into music in church, and my mom would play piano, and my first instrument that I played was in orchestra. I played violin, and I was one of those kids who played violin for 6 years. I was in the California has this honor orchestra where people compete and try out to be a part of this state orchestra. I was the 21st chair violin of the state of California. So that was pretty good for the state of California, but I was 21st. I was not first chair. And not only that, I didn't like the violin. I mean, I liked the way it sounded, loved strings as an instrument, but the physicality of playing a violin and the running the horsehairs through the rosin to rosin up your bow, it still gives me kind of like keyboard, fingernails on the chalkboard kind of feelings just thinking about it. I didn't really enjoy playing violin. I could do it, but that was when I was a little kid into high school. And then I had a band when I was 16, a professional band that we played clubs, and I was too young to be in the bars and clubs, but we would come in through the back and I'd get on the stage and we would play. So I was very much into music and playing music for a long time. And I went on to be in bands, and I was in a goth band called Burning Image, and we opened for the Dead Kennedys and a bunch of legendary old kind of gothy death rock bands from the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And, computers, I kept seeing, you can record into the computer and it'll play it back for you. And you can wire these instruments together and you can have your own recording studio, which is the whole reason I was always into computers as a kid. My mom used to park me at RadioShack, and I would play with the TRS 80, computer and play, Lunar Lander on a calculator. And I was always into that. My very first payroll job was at Atkinson Communications, where I washed circuit boards for this guy who made custom radio equipment for radio stations, and cleaned up the shop. And I was kind of always a techie guy, a nerd. I was kind of like a cool nerd. So I was like in a band, but I was cool. So I was cool, but I was also a super nerd who hung out with all the straight A students and talked about Monty Python and played Dungeons and Dragons, which what we did, and we were very much into it there. And with that background, I got it. I was a music theater major, blah blah blah. I was a music theory major for a long time, and I decided this was just ridiculous. There's no way I wanted to do any more of this. It was like, let's. It's called music theory, but what it is just like math on a page. You know, you're just voice leading and theory about how voices should move. It was. I just wanted to write songs, you know, but I went down that road for a long time. A long story, too much thing, but the thing about the early experiments with MIDI and building my own computer studio, I did Warlock. I still have it too. It's a 4-track Tascam that you record on a cassette tape and uses all 4 tracks to record 4 tracks of audio. I did all of the Warlock music on that little Tascam. So I would play it on a Opcode Vision, you know, on a Mac, and it would come in. And I would, you know, record the tracks to tape, and then I would re-record my tape back on the computer to sample it and use it. And the most terrible thing that most people do not understand about this era of like 1991 into the mid 90s is that there was no MP3, there was no JPEG. I mean, these things existed, but no computers. They were totally impractical. It would take way too long to decode the compressed than it would be to just load the big file. So not only was memory constrained, like a mere tiny fraction, the amount of memory we had, how fast everything was so constrained. The files were 20 times the size. So a little image now that you would see in a website that might be, you know, 20K, back then would be like, you know, 120K or 300K, and that would have to unpack into RAM, and you had like 1 meg of RAM. So everything on the screen was crowding out RAM, and it was so slow and painful. And but we had to do it anyway. One of the things about Warlock too, we're still talking about music. So I was into music for a long time, and I continue to be. And I've not both with graphics and animation from the 80s to now. I have been a professional working person in this field, always trying to know what's going on, what the latest tools are. And I'll say one thing about Macintosh back then, there was no other choice. There was simply it wasn't until Windows 95 came out that if you were in animation, graphics, music, Windows PCs were not a choice for you. I mean, you could get some really advanced workstation cards and get something good going on. But if you were just a normal guy wanting to make graphics and, you know, it started with desktop publishing and the ability to print high resolution graphics for magazines. That's where it began. But as it moved into video and stuff like that, the Macintosh was the only choice. The only place that had the color, it had multi-channel sound, it had all these great things. But even then, Macintosh was very much constrained, and everyone was on 8-bit color, and we had to stick to a 256 color palette, and the things we had to do, for example, the audio, the music. So Farallon MacRecorder had this little HyperCard X command that came with it that we used to drive the sound, because inside of Director, you could load external code libraries and use them and make calls. So it had this thing where you could thread together music. So I made all these little 4-bar loops that changed. They got a little more stressy, they got a little more relaxed, they got more victorious and whatever, but they were short little bars of music, and I had them all. I had a whole library of them. And what you could do with this X command is you could say, play continuously this one song, just loop it until I tell you a new song. So you would start something that's like it's going, you're poking around, you're clicking, and this music track would come on, and then you would open a door and things would get a little stressy, like something bad's happening or it looking a little scary. I would say, okay, play the stressy music now, and it would just fold in. On the next time it would come to repeat, it would take the new music and start repeating that. And so you could make a soundtrack that kind of threaded interactively depending on what you were doing. But the problem is you only had one channel of sound at that time to use in our situation. And so to play real sound and not a synthesizer sound, but just to play sound samples. And so anytime someone would say, hey, Terry, what are you doing here? Or whatever like that, use the front door. I had to cut the music, play the sound of the person talking, and then resume the music. So it's very clunky, but that's what we had at the time.
Yeah. I think everybody was just kind of doing their best. I know that Lucasfilm or then LucasArts invested a lot of time and trouble in their iMUSE system, so that way that you could have dynamic music inside games.
Yes,
and that was before the talkie era and everything else. So I mean, they kind of everybody was facing that same challenge. Yeah,
4-channel synth music. If you could, construct the MIDI notes on the fly, you could do algorithmic music with your synthesizer. And that's great stuff. That's what you hear on Nintendo and everything else, is everyone's got, these synth tracks that they're driving their little synthesizer to play. We were not doing that. There were options for us to do that, but it was just too messy. So we did all recorded music, which was part of the thing. I mean, the thing that we had that at that moment was that the graphics were making an upgrade. The hardware was kind of slowly upgrading, and we were able to jump in there and do something unlike other games before that were mostly doing, sprites moving around like video games. We were able to use real audio, real voices, and decent graphics for the time. For the time, and people were really like, "Wow, this is like a movie." And of course, it was nothing like a movie. But at the time,
it felt very cinematic.
To
people like myself, because I love adventure games,
sure,
and I love interactive fiction, which is why I absolutely honed in on Spaceship Warlock and Total Distortion and a lot of these games, just because it was like, it's that storytelling kind of thing that I think that for a while, especially with the multimedia revolution, that there was now a space for that, for telling big stories. Again, it's like you could tell a story in Ms. Pac-Man with a few cutscenes and things like that, but not these big epic space, these space opera kind of things that came much later. That kind of because you were talking about the file size limitations and things like that. It's like the kind of the gift of space that CD-ROM and things like that kind of gave us. But
well, like the other thing was the CD itself. So the only way to get software around was on a floppy disk, which cost about $1 each, and it held like 128K. And so like that could be one graphic, you know what I mean? And so here came a CD that could hold something like 600 floppy disk, and it was the same price to reproduce. So it was like, what? So now we could actually publish a big chunk of media. That was a huge barrier. In fact, the biggest hard drive I had in my Mac at the time was a 20 megabyte, not gigabyte, 20 megabyte drive. And a CD was, 600 plus megabytes. And so I'm like, where are we going to build this thing? I have to get a bigger hard drive. And I shopped around, and the only one that was was like $1,000 or something, was 120 meg hard drive, 120. So, about 1/6 the size of a CD, but that's the size of Spaceship Warlock, because that was the biggest hard drive I had. And we filled it to 120 megs, and we could go no further. And when we made the master, when we sent it off to a company to burn the first test pressing and for us to look at and test, I took my only copy of Spaceship Warlock, put it in a cardboard box, and DHL'd it to this company, where there goes, like, all I have is a bunch of floppy disks with backups a part of it. The only game is now in the mail. And then when we came out, we finally had backups, was our test pressings with the backups on these things. And the tools were really, really crude compared to today, as you might imagine.
Actually, that's a great segue into a next question, and some amazing stuff you brought up kind of in the pre-interview, which, with your music career and with all these great new tools and the Macintosh and all the things that it allowed you to do, what were some of the tools that you actually used on the Mac? You brought up the Farallon and kind of HyperCard with sort of being able to pull in those external libraries. But what type of actual, what did you use for sound editing and like creating graphics and doing 3D modeling and things? Like what were your go-to products back then?
Okay, well, Photoshop and SoundEdit at the time. SoundEdit was, again, they made a tool called MacRecorder, which was just a little box you could plug an audio thing and plug it into the Mac and record audio.
Yeah.
You know, like it was amazing. But it came with some software. One of them was this MacRecorder. So, to use your little piece of hardware, here's some audio editor. To this day, there's no more immediate, easy to use audio editing software than that. It's long gone, but it was really amazing at the time. As they developed it, it just got worse and worse and unusable. But back then, you could just grab audio, move it around, insert, drag things. It was very free to edit with. But the thing is we were using Electronic Arts was a pioneer of games in the 80s, right? On everything, and I was constantly inspired back in the mid 80s as a teenager, seeing this like, we are software artists, and they would show pictures of the guys who made the software on the back of the thing, like they were in an album cover or something. Yeah. It's like, we are software artists, we create new worlds, we do this. And I'm like, whoa, these guys, I like the way they're thinking. They were like, we're not, they were changing the attitude. We're a studio that produces, creative things. And I like these guys. I like what they're doing. And back then, the tools for their game creators were not so great. So they made their own, and they made this thing called Studio 8, eventually Studio 32 for the Macintosh, the color Macintosh, Mac 2. And Studio 8 came out, and that was our favorite paint program right there. And so early on, all the graphic editing we were doing was in Studio 8 from Electronic Arts, and which I traded Swivel 3D for. I was at Paracomp when we were doing Swivel 3D. And I would go to these trade shows, and I just have a whole bunch of software with me. And I would just walk to booths, and I'm like, oh, can I, and we would just go to software booths and trade each other's software. That's how I got to try tons of tools and bring them home. And Studio 8 was one of them. Now, eventually I'd meet Trip Hawkins and all this stuff because of Spaceship Warlock. But what happened, though, was one of my beta testers at Swivel was John Knoll, executive creative director of Lucasfilm. And but back then, him and his brother was working on this tool called Photoshop. And they were unknown people out in Marin. And he was a beta tester for me for Swivel, and was a very good one, very thorough, would write stuff back to me, would email back and forth. I talked to him on the phone, and he's like giving me tips for Swivel. He was one of the very best beta testers. Well, then when he went to beta test Photoshop 1.0 in 1990, he called me in and said, hey, you should test this. And we had a long rapport. I really am sad that I lost that contact over the years. But back then we had a nice rapport. He would send me little tools that he made for converting grayscale maps into 3D mountain ranges and stuff. He did a lot of really cool tools, but he sent me Photoshop, and I was like completely blown away. There were so many advances in thinking about graphics that, to me, the selection, now we think of alpha channels for selecting a silhouette of a person or a logo shape or something like that. This was invented in Photoshop. Well, it probably wasn't, the core tools were invented long ago, but the core concepts, but introduced to the world on computers was Photoshop. You could make a selection that might take you a long time to do, and instead of clicking it, disappear forever and have to redo it every time you want to select the face or something, you could say save selection, and now you had a copy of it, and you could reload it, and then you could perform operations on that selection. So instead of like tint everything blue, you could select a face and just tint the face blue. And that concept of dealing with your selections is an important part that you don't want to lose and you want to reuse. Led to layers and all these other things in graphics that we use all the time. So we switched from Studio 8 to Photoshop, and we felt like we were living in the future with this incredible tool. But at the time, the graphics were very 8-bit. No one knows what the color, what a palette taking over your entire system and every color on your computer that has to fit into 256 colors. That was a huge limitation that caused endless headache. And to get around the headaches, we just said, we're going to use the system palette. We're not going to do any other palette. Anyway, on the audio front, Vision from Opcode was my main audio tool for a long time. Endless stories of things not working on the Amiga. Amiga had a timing problem. I had an Amiga and I had all this MIDI software. I kept trying it, but there was some error with this clock that your MIDI would speed up and slow down, which destroyed its usefulness. So Macintosh was finally rock solid. And I used that for years and years. Vision and then Studio Vision. Now to record audio, you don't understand. I had to get an audio media card that could do audio. at a high level and record multiple tracks and play them back, because the Mac did not have that.
Right.
You know, so I had to buy a card and then use special software to record 4 tracks of audio, vocals alongside your MIDI and mix them together. Those were the days, and that made it all possible, and it was great. It was a really great time, you know. But it was the early days.
Yeah.
But you know, the director, we were using Director, and I was really, really good at that. I had been animating in that for a long time. Endless stories. I don't know where to go. I mean, I was at Paracomp, by the way. Just one other thing about Macromedia and all that. My early history with these guys is I was like employee number 7 at Paracomp. Macromind made VideoWorks, was the animation tool for Macintosh. Very great, a lot of innovation there in doing animation. So they were in Chicago and we were in Townsend. We were the first software company south of Market right here in San Francisco. And man, San Francisco was a very different place back then. There was a lot of like textiles and like sweatshops south of Market. We were only software company there. It would become, of course, within a few years, very famous for the SOMA south of Market, South Park, everything, Twitter, everything, right? But back then, it was just us down there making this weird 3D software. Well, Macromedia, it turns out all of our customers needed VideoWorks to show their 3D stuff, and all the VideoWorks people were using Swivel. So we ended up merging and called ourselves Macromind Paracomp. And then eventually we called ourselves Macromedia. And I was a part of that early days, and I eventually returned there after Spaceship Warlock. I kind of rose. I had some fame in the interactive world because of Warlock and Total Distortion. And then ultimately I was looking for a job after all that was over. And I came back in the late 90s to Macromedia, where I started shockwave.com and did Radiskull and Devil Doll and did a round 2 of my career with the Macromedia people back then. But yeah, those were the days.
Yeah, they certainly were. It was, I mean, I have no idea how simultaneously scary and amazing it would have been to be at the cutting edge of all of that, where you're building the tools that you need to sort of produce the type of media and experiences and stuff that you were wanting to share with gamers and with other creative people. It's I can't imagine
from that era. So there's a couple things I should mention because of your Macintosh background and history there. I saw Steve Jobs unveil the next computer at the SF Opera House, and he picked a handful of innovative developers, like 5 of us, to be there for that. I was one of them. So I was up there showing Swivel in the Opera House galley or whatever, that mezzanine up in the top, kind of overlooking it. We set up booths and we were showing software to all the people who were coming in. And then he gets out there and does this whole show. I wasn't heavily aware of Steve Jobs. I knew of him, but it would be like knowing about, oh yeah, I know there's some guy who was a CEO I've seen in the news a few times. You know, it wasn't like I wasn't like a religious guy with that. But I saw firsthand Steve Jobs unveil in 1988 the next computer and the whole rigmarole, get out there on stage, do it, show it, and one more thing. And you know, and I ran into him a few times back then, but that's where we were. I also saw Jean-Louis Gasset do the Interactive Multimedia Conference in 1988, where they hyped all the new CD stuff coming out. And so I met a lot of those people. I ended up working with a lot of not Steve Jobs, but a lot of people during the unveiling of Macs at various times. In fact, how I funded, so Spaceship Warlock was just 2 guys with no money at the time. Mike Saenz was in Chicago and I was here, and there was no internet. There was AOL, where it would take 1 hour to send like a 100K file. So we had to ship hard drives back and forth to each other. That's how we traded files. We'd talk on the phone endlessly. He would fax things to me, designs. I would build them in 3D. And we built the whole thing over a fax machine. We could talk, chat, but mostly we called and faxed. You know, this is 1990, 1991. And the speeds of internet and file transfer were so slow, it was completely impractical. All you could do was maybe send one tiny graphic if you wanted to send it and let it take an hour. Yeah.
I remember those days.
Yeah.
It's the world. It felt smaller, but it was still pretty big in those days for trying to kind of collaborate on some of those creative things. I can absolutely understand the frustration.
Yeah, it was a very exciting time. You know, it was an exciting time, but it was I don't even know how to summarize it. I would say, you know, it's just like today in a way that, like, still my mom had no idea what I was doing. Like, I would explain it or whatever. I mean, you were always just kind of the oddball who was in computer stuff. And most people, you know, while they may enjoy games or stuff like that, most people just didn't even know what you were doing. Or you would say, I work on 3D software, 3D, you know, like they didn't even have a basis to know what you were doing. So you would cluster with all the other geeks and, you know, build off of each other in this area here. And south of Market, San Francisco, something in the water or the magnetic fields or something brought people like me away from our little towns up here to cluster and huddle with all these other people, nerds who loved this stuff and believed in it and worked in it endlessly. I had my 20s were, I ended up being so strange that I worked all night long and would go to bed at 9 in the morning. And because no one was bothering me, so I could get a lot done overnight. And then I'd wake up and go to sleep just when everyone wanted to bother me. I did that for like 10 years. And during Spaceship, Warlock and everything else, I just kind of rotated my life outside. And, you know, spending the time we spent like sleeping on the ground, sleeping on under your desk and all that stuff was just really totally normal stuff. Especially for me in my early 20s at Paracomp, the magazines and the trade shows were so important. That was it. There was no internet. There was nothing. But that's why there were so many magazines. We had free computer weekly magazines, huge, like phone book magazines every week. Here comes some more. And I would be going through them. What's out? What's the newest? Everything. And Macworld and MacUser and all those things were very important. And all of those magazines came to my office, and after hours, I would just sit there reading them. There was an all-night donut shop down where there's a giant stadium there, which is right across the street. It just used to be dust. It just used to be a sagebrush and an empty field with tents of, you know, hobos camping out there. That's where the field is now, the giant stadium. Well, I used to go out and look on this fire escape and go down to this donut shop, and I would go to all the free magazines and read them all the time. That's how you kept up with everything, was the magazines. And then the trade shows is when you got all together and showed what you were doing. And at these trade shows, you won't believe the people I met. I met Ted Nelson, Xanadu, hypertext founder, pioneer of the 60s, who invented a lot of the internet before it ever could happen. Steve Wolfram, you know, Mathematica guy. I traded Mathematica with Steve Wolfram, with many famous people. The inventor of HyperCard. One of the most amazing things in 1988, I went to Boston Macworld, and it was such a culture of my first Macworld, Boston Macworld, 1988, and we went to see. He just recently died. The main guy from HyperCard, Bill. Okay, what was his last name? Bill
Atkinson.
Bill Atkinson. Okay, so he was a superstar, and I didn't know he was a superstar yet. This is my first Macworld. I went to some big party. It was a HyperCard party, and so I go there. It's this huge, beautiful women, lots of people, and out comes Bill Atkinson on this stage, and everyone's cheering like, you know, Mick Jagger arrived on the stage. Yeah. And HyperCard was super influential, and it was such a great thing, and people shared software. And I think that spirit of HyperCard, where people are creating new tools for themselves and sharing with others, and there's this thriving back and forth. That's what we're seeing in AI right now today, is all these teeny tiny little companies sharing little bits of the puzzle and stitching them together. I really feel like this moment right now is kind of like that late 80s buzzing up of a lot of independent developers creating and innovating. And I'm very optimistic about it.
Oh yeah, it's amazing that we've had these experiences where, like you were talking about, how things used to be a little bit more isolated, but then people kind of got together where it's like, hey, here's this hot spot where things are happening right now, where I can talk to like-minded people and I can share ideas and kind of in a pre-internet world. I don't know that young people understand how isolating a lot of this used to be, because it used to be the computer kid at your school, or you used to be like, oh, it's that AV guy, or it's the music nerd, or something like that. And so to be able to go out and find your people I think is such a super important thing. I'm glad the internet has closed the gap, because it's saved lives, that's for sure. So you don't think I'm the only one, or I'm alone in whatever this is that I'm going through, that we've been able to kind of make these spaces for people to feel comfortable and to feel validated and be able to explore creative endeavor and stuff. So I'm so glad that you were able to kind of be able to do that, because it laid the foundation, especially with like your work at like Paracomp and Macromedia and all of that, that kind of, we'll certainly talk about it later, and like the kind of the democratization of art and being able to kind of get those ideas out there. But one of the first places that you kind of took some of those skills was Reactor. And again, such an important company in terms of, interactive fiction titles and just trying things, throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, doing action titles and all of that too.
Right. So, well, first of all, the part where Reactor, there's the supercar developer, another Bill, he eventually came in with Creepy Castle. He was a very capable programmer guy who eventually joined us, and I was on my way out just as he joined. And in fact, I think Mike Saenz thought I got a better Joe Sparks with this guy.
Oh yeah, Bill Appleton. Yeah,
Bill Appleton. Yeah, who we're still friends, and we talk. After that all fell apart, he called me and said, "You were right about everything." Oh yeah, wow. And he went on to do his own thing. What happened? We had a tough. Mike Saenz was a genius who was also kind of a hothead and difficult, and we somehow, by being in different cities and talking through the phone, we just had a complete mind melt where we could describe a scene and riff on it. And then he does this, and then let's do it. And we were constantly trying to impress each other. So wait till you see what I did with this robot. You're going to love it. DHL arrives tomorrow morning, and you can open up the SyQuest cartridge I sent you. Yeah. And the 45 megabyte. Changer.
Yes.
SyQuest thing this big with 45 megabytes. Yep. I have this little tiny, a 32 gigabyte thing that's smaller than your fingernail.
Oh yeah.
I can't even imagine.
Little tiny SD cards now,
SD cards, 32 megabytes. I've got a 600 gigabyte camera card. It's like nobody understands how precious and expensive memory was. So anything you did, oh shit, I saved a file. How much of my 20 megabytes do I have left?
My PowerBook 100, the very first Mac that was 100% my machine, got it secondhand. 20 meg hard drive, 2 megs of RAM.
Right.
Talk about some limitations. You had to absolutely kind of be very militant about how you stored things, and you had 1,000 floppy disks sticking off to the side. But yes, SyQuest and iOmega with like the Bernoulli drives and stuff.
Yes,
game changer. Finally,
the zip drives made things so much easier. The zip drives were the size of a floppy, but they held like 128 megs. All of this is freaking dust now. Like it literally does. I have 30 terabytes of storage online and another 30 offline. So like on my computer right now, I can't even believe what we have now. It's really amazing. But those constraints,
we definitely, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's like we greatly benefit from the extra space, but it's kind of gotten away from the idea that it's like things need to be small and svelte and fast and all of that, because it's like, oh, they got like 2 terabyte hard drive on this machine. You just, your application can be 30 gigs and it's no big deal. It's optimizing because of CD-ROMs were so slow too. They were slower when they first came out. They were slower than a modem. We talk about all those slow modem speeds. That's how slow CD-ROM drives were on your computer. So you would play something and wait for it freaking load. It was really slow. And also they were $1,200. So when we shipped Spaceship Warlock, the Apple drive was $1,200. So you're talking about rich Macintosh guys, the only people that you were going to sell anything to. And that's the way it was for the first year. We were a little early because Mist came out after us and just cleaned up, but we were kind of old news by then.
but you know, we did what we could do. The working together, we had the magic that we had, which is sad that we lost it, was ability to communicate these ideas and execute and do them. So I could build the shit, I could animate it, and this was my first programming experience. So like I had to learn how to do games, do anything. So anything you saw in there, it was me doing it for the first time. I learned a lot during that time. It was really great. Later, the optimization, because the things you would do to optimize, one of the things was understanding run length compression of those early picked file formats that were not JPEG, which is a whole different way of doing graphics. What you did is it wrote a pixel value for the first pixel. And then if that pixel continued, it would just say, continue to line 128. So it could one heavy color value and say, just keep using this until you hit another color, and then write a new record for that. That's called run length compression. So you're not like writing big numbers for every pixel all the way down. You just keep going and you say, okay, shorthand like that. Knowing that, I could go in and look at graphics and see if they were changing color over time too subtly to even care. This is what JPEG does anyway. It mushes colors that are so similar, you can't really tell all that much. So I would just literally go in and look at a graphic that was taking too long to load and make a constant pixel for as long as I could in as many areas as I could so the thing could load much faster. Now in RAM, it took up the same amount of unpacked. It took the same amount of headspace in RAM once you loaded it, but you could make something load 10 times faster, way faster by just artfully using run length compression anyway. Those kind of optimizations, though, that kind of thinking led to me doing well in internet advertising in the early days, because I could make a whole little movie happen in an ad banner of various sizes and make it very, very compressed and efficient on the animation side.
Well, it's as part of all of that, it's nice too, especially as kind of you think about how some of these older machines, and you're talking about transfer rates on media and things like that, where it's like, you know, it was kind of a like back in those days, I owned a lot more CD-ROMs than drives I actually owned. You'd go to school and play something, or go to the library and do some of that stuff kind of in the early days. But it's, I mean, I to make those experiences interactive and make them pop and stuff like that, I can definitely understand how you had to do those sort of optimizations and stuff to kind of keep things moving, because I mean, the drives aren't fast, the machines weren't fast, especially like some of the Mac 2 and things like that. If you've just got some of the middling sort of like video cards in those eras, they weren't accelerated in any way. So
no, it was terrible. It was terrible.
We made it though.
But it was the best you had. It was the best you had. Like if you wanted to do color, graphics, animation, and sound, the Macintosh was your only choice until Windows 95. So it was just impossible to do it on Windows. You could try. You may be able to do one thing okay, but it wasn't serious until Windows 95, and that changed everything. At that point, that's when Adobe and everyone started creating for Windows. Like there wasn't even any Adobe stuff. I mean, they touched their toe in the water, but once Windows 95, they had a full like 32-bit model, graphics, sound. You know, they had a modern operating system with lots of multimedia hooks, and that changed it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It certainly better tools for developers. You're going to actually start to attract people to your platform. If you make things difficult, you're going to have issues unless you just want to throw money at things. I think Sony kind of hit that with some of their game consoles and all of that over the years. But moving from Reactor, you made some cool games there. Thanks for everything. The sound design on Creepy Castle is really, really great. Again, it is my favorite game for
I'm glad you like it.
Macintosh machines.
All we did was hip it up a little. So like Bill Appleton had this completed game, and I did some music, and Mike redesigned some of the elements, and so we just did a kind of a touch up, you know, a spruce up. He had already pulled the whole game together, you know.
Because it went through a bunch of different kind of iterations where, because I interviewed Bill earlier this year, and he was like, I don't remember everything about it. It's been a very long time, but he had some fun things to share. But it's kind of started out as like a little shareware thing that he did called Wolves in the Woods, and then it became like Frankie's Castle, and then or I'm sorry, Frankie's Dungeon, and then when it moved over with the distribution stuff at Reactor, it got like a big layer of polish on it. That's for sure.
Right.
So thank you for your contribution.
Yeah, he liked we you know, at that first Macworld, well, the first Macworld that we showed Warlock, I met a lot of people, and I met Appleton there, and we talked with them and talked about maybe getting together, and we did. Within a year, we actually worked together. But I had known him from Supercard, you know, and Silicon Beach Software and all that, and so they had their own Super 3D too. So Paracomp and Silicon Beach were kind of like California peers there for a while, and we were very well aware of each other and what they were doing. But yeah, Bill Appleton is a great guy. He went on to do amazing stuff and lots of titles, and he's still cranking stuff out today.
Yeah, he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
So I actually one of those things, like with the kind of later on developed I think it's the Titanic game and things, and it was like right at the same time as the Titanic movie came out, and I was like, I don't think you could have hit better timing on that. And he goes, it's like, yeah, it helped.
Right, absolutely.
But after you left Reactor, you founded a company called Pop Rocket and made a game that I know a lot of people are familiar with. Again, it's kind of one of those like multimedia, like genre bending kind of titles, Total Distortion. Do you want to maybe talk about like founding Pop Rocket and kind of the creative process and getting Total Distortion across the line?
So after, I mean, when you do a game like this that has a theme, I mean, so after Spaceship Warlock, I wanted to do something kind of different. The main thing I wanted to do, I mean, games used to be a lot different. There were games of, you know, the intricacies of trading or, you know, managing ships and cannons. There were very detailed games with lots of strange activities in it. And what happened to us during Total Distortion is the first-person shooter Doom, Quake, World, Pathways into Darkness started appearing, and that just captured everything. It was like, that's the end of game. That was the end of kind of experimental games. Now everything is first-person shooter. They got much better with GTA and stuff like that. When I see my sons playing GTA, and I'm like, you know, they go up and they use a phone and they claim it. I think of Warlock, where you go and you use the video phone and you book a ticket to get on a ship, and you go around and things kind of work. In Total Distortion, I was trying to take that even further, where not only did things kind of work, you could make something with it. You could make a little video. You could make a Fisher-Price music video with your little tool, and you could call people, and there was kind of a world going on, and you were so, you know, with the tools we had at the time, I did my best to, like, you make your food and your sandwiches, and you need to eat them. And then the idea is the treasures were things you could use. They weren't like, oh, I have the, you know, holy cross of, you know, whatever that's worth money and I can trade it for another weapon. It was like, no, you could go out with your camera and grab stuff, collect things, come back to your little editing and create something new out of the stuff you had gathered. So I was trying to make a treasure hunting game, but the treasure was media things that you could use, and there was some creative aspect to it and more creative activities. The hardest thing about Total Distortion, which is called a music video adventure game, the whole thing was the treasures. You made music videos, you sold them to producers, and you tried to survive. And you had guitar. There was music battles where you played a guitar and you tried to match the chord with the one coming at you, and you tried to collide with them. It was kind of like a missile shooting game, but your guitar chords.
It's kind of it's like a rhythm title. It's like, people think about games where it's sort of like that. That's why I say kind of genre bending, because there's so much different types of gameplay built into it. You think about Mike Tyson's Punch Out as an example. Right. And people are like, oh, it's kind of like an action title or something like that. It's a rhythm game. You just have to it's just pattern memorization, kind of like win the fight or whatever. Sure. And Total Distortion, it's very much, it's figuring out, it's like, collect the right media resources, edit things together in the exact right way. You've got those little cutscene battle kind of things where you're fighting and doing the guitar battle. losing those doesn't feel like a loss just because of like the humor and stuff in the game.
Dead. You are dead. Thought you were hot. Guess what? You're not. You are dead. And that You Are Dead song, it's like still keeps showing up in like top 10 game over songs of all time. It's out there. There are people who have done operatic rock versions of it. If you just do search You Are Dead Total Distortion, you will see just endless videos on YouTube. I haven't done it in a while, but like 3 years ago, I couldn't believe the stuff I was seeing.
Yes,
that people have done around
one of those meme things in gaming.
And that got us through a lot of, I mean, one of the interesting things to me is like you're sitting here all night working on this stuff, imagining what people are going to think about it, trying to make it look right. And all of a sudden you're getting giddy and you're excited to go show it. And so now you're going to go show it for the first time in front of a huge crowd. Some of the crowds, like at Macworld, Washington, D.C., I think I had like 2,000-3,000 people in the audience. One time at Windows World Tokyo, I had even more than that in the audience. And you're showing this stuff, and you've got this hot body, mass of people out there.
Yes.
And you're like, I had some of the most profound, crazy ass experiences doing that. I'm like, when I was showing Warlock for the first time, I keep telling a story because I always try to remember these gems you would never think there were gems. So in the city, you're starting out in the city, and we'd render all this stuff. Everything took time to render. So if you made a mistake, it's like you're looking at, do I want to render for 3 days to fix this mistake, or is there some other way to fix the mistake? And when you're first learning how to navigate in the city and move around the city by clicking, I realized that we had put a door in that early scene, but we had nothing for that door to do. And if you clicked on the door and it did nothing, then later you're much less likely to click on a door. If you click on a door in your first scene, it does nothing. You know, you need to be able to make a statement that if you click on a door, it's going to do something. So I'm like, what are we going to do with this door that's not happening? Because we realized it was a problem. So we decided, well, we'll have the bartender who's around the corner, because of the design of it, he was around the corner. We'll have the bartender stick his head out and say, use the front door. If you click on the door, he goes, use the front door. And you close it. Yeah. I'm sitting here in front of this audience and I'm showing, let's try this door. And out comes, use the front door. This little peekaboo animation. And the whole audience goes, I'm like, what happened? Yeah. Well, that peekaboo moment just made people burst into laughter. Never thought it. It was to cover a mistake. It was to cover an interface mistake that if we were really worried that if the door didn't open, no one would click on anything and it would ruin the game, especially on the first scene of the game. And so, there were a lot of experiences like that where people were really, really entertained by things in an audience situation that I just thought were mildly amusing or whatever, but you never knew what was going to happen. And it was really fun to show that stuff live and see people react to the jokes. And Total Distortion was really good for a live audience because there were just so many crazy jokes in everything. And the sound design, I think I'm most proud of the sound design, which is very simple, but what I would do is for any kind of activity, I'd come up with a battery of sounds that were for that activity. And so I had many different categories of sounds. And what I would do is I would dispense randomly from the pack, but I would only dispense from that category. So, mouse down sounds, mouse up downs, editing, dragging. So I had all kinds of when you drag something. So I had all these little loops, but I would pull from them randomly. So they would do different things, but in the same category. So I had batteries of sounds for different activities, opening, closing, everything was making noises and crackly things and random things. Oh yeah. Or, like it was always talking at you and, oh, that's great. Or, it was quirky sound effects that I had in the editing tools. I thought that was the more innovative thing. And I'm surprised that people don't use sound more effectively to guide you. Just when you're dragging, I mean, there's so much you could do to give people other feedback. Oh, I'm going higher, I'm going lower. You could almost make, image editing for the blind if you used sound properly to guide where you are and what you're doing.
You're 100% right. That was one of the things. It's a positive feedback for interacting and doing things correctly. To kind of get you into that game universe. It's like KidPix does that.
Right.
where
I remember that.
when you do the tools and things, like every tool has a sound or every activity has a sound, and it's that reinforcement that it's like you're playing a game that's an enjoyable experience. It's like, you know, but we're gonna give you like these little audio rewards for playing. So
And
yeah,
by the
no, I appreciate that.
And by the mid 90s, we finally had multi-channel sound triggers. So I could have the music going and we could do all the little sound effects on top of the music while the music was playing. It was like, it finally worked.
It's again, it's a lot of fun. And there's so much in it that has like, it's just little kind of meme things that have like stuck with gamers and all of that. But you talked about some of the reactions you got when you were showing the title off. But I mean, did you think at the time that Total Distortion would have the legacy that it does today?
Oh, I thought, you know, ultimately we failed. I mean, we did really well our first year. Like suddenly we had millions of dollars from our first shipment, but then afterwards maintaining the office and the people and starting our next thing, everything was falling apart at that moment. And I had to close the company. And it was one of the worst days of my life, to tell you the truth. It was really, really rough. And I did so many things wrong, and I learned a lot of valuable lessons. But like, I'll pass on the most valuable lesson. If you are worried that you're not going to be able to make it, don't drag it out. Like, start. Like, if you're in a situation, it's like, gee, we've got $1 million in the bank and our burn rate is, you know, 100,000 a month. Yee, okay, in 10 months we'll drain all this money, and what will we have, and can we get to the other side? At that moment, you need to go like, listen, we just need to let everyone go find real jobs, because we don't have it together. We need to, like, we could have made it. We really could have made it, because what I didn't see, talk about a life lesson. So I was so in the CD-ROMs in boxes on shelves. Like, that meant like we need a game that goes in a box and goes on a shelf, that even though we had the #1 gaming website on planet Earth called poprocket.com, it's not me anymore. I mistakenly let it slide at the wrong time. I could have still had it. I had it for a long time, but I lost track of it. But at the time, in 1994, we were winning awards of like, hot new game site, Pop Rocket. And we put all these activities and games on there from Total Distortion. And we kept winning awards, and people, I have some of the awards of like, you know, web. So we were at the beginning of the web. We had the best gaming website. We were right there. Everyone knew us. We had all kinds of things. We could have right then said, like, we're just going to do web stuff. We're just going to be a website that does fun stuff on the web. If we had made that decision right there at 95, I mean, we had it. We totally had it. We even had investors and everything. But because we were locked into this retail game thing, which, by the way, is a lot of a, and that was the only way to get software. You couldn't really download a title. It had to go through a retail. And it turns out that you're paying these people. So like, you pay at the time, CompUSA, here's $15,000 to stock our game this weekend. Yeah. And they're all like, oh, if you want to be on the shelves, you got to spend $4K in the Sunday Circular. So they're like just sucking money out of developers just to put your game in the store. And we were new to that game, and we didn't understand it. And we were just outfoxed every which way. And especially for a game like Total Distortion, which people would put in like the music section, or they'd put in the something else. Like they didn't know they didn't even know it was a game. It was too weird looking and too odd.
Well, and it's unfortunate that kind of like some of those things happen, and like especially with the retail stuff, it's what a scam distribution is. It's a lot of that again has been kind of changed just with being able to sell things direct, like digital distribution and all of that. Unfortunately that those tools just weren't available. I mean, you just didn't have broadband. You didn't have things like that to make all that a possibility. It took a long time for Steam and GOG and you know, platforms like that to kind of make these things really easy to just make a sale. And
also, like, all of my everything that I've done has been pirated endlessly. So like, not that I don't even know if I could even make any money with any of these old titles. I mean, there's possibly a way. Well, if you can, somebody else is doing it. It's like Spaceship Warlock is on all these services. So is Total Distortion. and I've written it's like, oh wow, that's my game.
Yeah.
It's like no one writes you back. But you know, this is happening to everybody. Amazon is just a pirate play. So like there's popular authors that release a book and there's 15 pirated copies right down to the exact paper and book. And Amazon does nothing about it. In fact, they just let it happen. So piracy, it's long gone. Like it's very difficult to, you know, the way it works right now, it's like you have to have your own personal audience that you can sell things to.
Right.
You know, it's very hard to make it out there in pirate world, you know?
Yeah. I do think that that nostalgia is a great thing to lean on, because there are a ton of people that remember these titles very fondly. That would be like, oh yeah, like I'd throw $10 at this to have a updated version that it might run through you know, like an emulator or something like that, but I could play it on a modern machine.
Well, I'm hoping that I can recreate these. Like I'm looking forward. I mean, I'm on it. I am right now. I am everything AI tool as it's coming out from the people. I'm there. I'm usually installing it on the day that they launch a new model. I can see it.
Vibe coding has. I mean, there's people using vibe coding to make Apple II games today.
Right. That's amazing.
So yeah, I mean, so there people.
I think within a year or two, I won't even have to feed it anymore. I've got a closet full of hard drives. But if I took some of the data from the originals, I took some original graphics and all the existing videos of the game's walkthroughs. There's endless hours. Like every nook and cranny has probably been explored by somebody on some YouTube video. I could say, you know, scan all these, look at my files. Now let's make a new game based on this. And let's, you know what I mean? Like I can see it happening. I'll be able to resurrect this material and guide it from today. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping I'll be able to resurrect old material and create new material in the same worlds, or I'll just completely new stuff. You know, like many times I've looked at it back when it seemed to be more viable. Like, believe it or not, we actually made a decent amount of money on, not a lot, but like it was refreshing at the time. Like on bundling our old games. Like we were like, you know, it's been 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And it's like, someone goes like, we want to do a, you know, cool sci-fi bundle. And we did some with EA and we'd make like $50,000. Like we would like just say, sure, use our latest disc. And in fact, some of the upgrades to the only ways they got out was on these bundleware. I actually had a Total Distortion, a later version that fixed some bugs, and it only went out on the bundleware. Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why like archive.org and places like that kind of, some people look at it, it's kind of like, oh, it's piracy. The only way
it's
that
surviving,
the only way it's still there is because people fought enough to be like, we've got to archive this, so that way that, I mean, and
YouTube may be the only, you know, it's so sad to watch these games being played on an emulator and they don't work right because the timing's off. One of the biggest problems is that I was trying to squeeze every bit of performance out, that I wasn't thinking about the day when chips, you know, computers would be 20,000 times faster. So there's a lot of games that just
they don't play right.
What happens is it just goes, it just zips through the thing. And it's like, I can't play it. I can't see it. And it's like, oh, jeez, I didn't have a max headroom. You know, I didn't have a thing to, don't go any faster than this, because it wasn't on my mind to go faster. That was impossible. I was constantly trying to go faster, and it ruined a few key moments. Like in Total Distortion on emulators, people try to play the Dream game, which has a drag on it. And all of a sudden it goes at max frame rate and you can't play it. It's sad.
It's I think the people that enjoy that are the speedrunner people, which I guess like the world record speedrun for Total Distortion is like 20 minutes or something. And I'm like, yeah, it's just burning.
I didn't even know there was something. I didn't even know that existed. That's crazy.
But no, it's the nostalgia on this is so huge. Like John Calhoun, the guy that wrote Glider and Pararena and like tons of like those kind of like platformer and action title kind of things for the Macintosh. He's back at it. He's re-releasing games and doing updated versions and just leveraging Steam for distribution on all of that, and it seems to be going pretty well. So there's buyers and there's now platforms out there. If there is I'm not asking you to tease a Total Distortion remastered. But if it were to happen, I will be the first person in line to purchase it.
Well, that's really nice of you. Thank you. I have hope that I might do something like that, but right now I think about it, but it's been a long time.
It's been a minute.
This is
that's for sure.
30 years ago. It was 30 years ago that Total Distortion came out, right around this time. I think it was like October, September maybe. So coming up, it's literally the 30-year anniversary. I haven't done anything. I'm thinking about making some sort of updates to some of the artwork just for fun, like maybe do some AI versions of the artwork and some various takes on the songs or something like that. I want to do that in the next month or so, so at least I can say, hey, 30 years ago I made this crazy thing.
People remember, and people would love to see that stuff. So it's I've said it a couple times, but this is a very important part of a lot of people's like growing up and playing games and kind of getting into the media. And this is the stuff that inspired them to like follow IT degrees or to become a graphic artist on the computer and they were like, I saw this amazing thing. And this was something that really captured my imagination. I want to be part of that world. And I mean, that's why I'm here. I'm one of those kids that like sat in the computer lab and played games and just kind of, you could be outside playing kickball, and I wanted to do something in logo, but it's so
I remember, Commodore 64 was my first computer. I had a computer lab at my high school and we played on a server things, but my first real computer, and boy, did I have a lot to learn. I thought that when I got my computer, I'd come home and I would program things before I would use them. That's how I would use the computer. I would there's all these free programs and magazines. I will type them in and run them, and that's how I'll use my computer. Yeah. I never successfully typed in a program. I never successfully. I would type in this thing and hit run, and it would have an error, and I'm like, what? What?
Error on line 4000.
And then I'm like, oh wait, where am I going to store this? I had a tape cassette to store it. And learned all that stuff the hard way. But the thing is about the EA thing, it was like, by the time the Amiga came around, I learned the fundamentals of everything I'd be doing for the rest of my life with deluxe video, deluxe music construction set, and deluxe paint on the Amiga, painting. And the baby versions like Koala Pad on Commodore 64. I'm using my Commodore 64. I'm painting between two screens, and I'm popping between these two screens, and I'm laying stamps of cars or whatever. I'm like, I could immediately see someday that could be a real car, and this could be real things. I could rotate the car. I could already see where it was all going to be in like the 80s on this cheap little tiny computer with 320 by 240 resolution on a TV. But I could see it, and it's finally here. It's like it took a very long time, but the future that we thought about had happened. It took a long time, but it's pretty much here. But you could see it, and so once you had that in your head from those early days, timelines, moving, different graphics, and layering in and triggering audio and all that stuff, that basics existed in the 80s on the Amiga, and it just got better over time.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. But you talk about like creation and kind of the tools and getting to the point. I mean, you were an early employee there at Paracomp and Macromedia, and something I absolutely wanted to talk to you about is how Flash just democratized creative expression on the internet and gave so many people amazing tools to like make videos and make games and make these interactive experiences. And even you yourself with like Radiskull and Devil Doll. I mean, that's kind of like one of the original kind of meme series. It's like a Homestar Runner. It's like it's like any of that other stuff that era.
Yeah. I mean, I started with a kind of like artist in residence role at Macromedia, and I would make crazy things and share them with people and talk about the tools. And then the CEO said, I want to team you up with a couple people to create a showcase site called shockrave.com is what we called it at the time. Was too confusing for people. We just called it Shockwave because we already had a product called Shockwave, and it was the version of Flash and Director that ran on the web. This was the beginning of the web days, and Flash was basically a better director. Director had a legacy of bloat. Flash was a cleaned up version that was very addressing the problem of the web, how slow it was, by creating this super lightweight vector-based player. So you could draw big pictures with gradients and they weren't taking up a megabyte of space. Mm-hmm. They were little teeny tiny instructions that said draw a gradient. So like the graphics were generated on the fly, kind of like 3D graphics are generated just by you moving around, and they're not stored. No one's storing all these pictures somewhere and sending you the pictures. They're just generated. But this was like a 2D version of that, where you could make all these shapes. You could paint anything you want. You had layers and you could move stuff around. And what it would save was just the vector math of those items. And the engine would resurrect it and bring it to life in real time. And there's still nothing like video is nothing like this. When you see Flash being rendered in perfect anti-alias, crisp resolution at any size in real time, there's something to that look and feel that does not exist, and it's past. But the reason why it was invented was to get past the slow internet speed, to scale up, make motion and graphics and sound for the web, and it worked, and it took off, and it finally, a lot of the people who really cared the most about that were the fashion designers. So, Prada and all these people who care about image, and they want pixel perfect version. They want that model in this place with this typeface looking just like that. We would never do anything differently. Don't tell us we have to use tables and HTML we're not touching that. So they were just doing whole images photography and saying, fuck you and your stupid ass web look. We will not be doing that. So here came Flash along and said, you can look exactly how you want. You can, and it's always going to look like that. It's not going to put the font over here.
It's programming. It's math.
Have you ever seen that CSS? There's this hilarious CSS joke that I first saw at Google. It's like, it's a box and it says CSS is awesome, but this is awesome goes outside of the box like that. It's just a joke of like the insanity of web rendering and HTML and how just
your screen's different. Oh, your resolution's different. Oh, your platform's different.
This runs best on Netscape Navigator with blah blah. You remember when that happened?
Yes, I remember.
It just fractured into BS, and everyone kept trying to. Oh no, we're gonna open source standards, and it just got worse and worse. Yeah. It's something bad about that, but anyway, Flash had said, "Screw all you people and whatever you're doing. We've made a nice C-based just for Windows, just for Macintosh. It's optimized. It's real software. It runs in your browser, and it's an engine for doing sound, video, all these things, all these multimedia things. It brought it to the web, made it practical, and it just went crazy. Like everybody started making sites for this. Now there was a downside to that because there's an art to doing optimized sites. You would have these sites that were slow and awful and bogged down. That's because it's a discipline to work with these tools, and people tried, and some people did really well with it. And ultimately what happened with Flash was Steve Jobs wrote that letter and said, oh, it's against our it's problems and we don't want to deal with it. And the thing is, though, is that was all lies. I was there at the time. The main thing was happening was all politics. So Steve Jobs hated Google because they were doing Android, and they had acquired DoubleClick, which was the whole Flash-based network for advertising on the web that was dominating the web for rich media ads. Now that was Google, and now they had the phone, and Steve Jobs was just trying to hack at them. Plus, he was trying to attack Adobe for not supporting the Macintosh when he went back to Apple. So that's a big saga too. In fact, Macromedia we had Steve Jobs comes and visit us at Macromedia because we rushed to create Macintosh X versions, Macintosh 10 versions of the software. Where I have my own opinion about this. I could go. The thing is, I have like encyclopedic experience of this area, and it's hard for me to know what to say and what I want to say and what's the most important to say. And I'd say the most important thing for me personally to say, because I'm still pissed to this day, is Steve Jobs destroyed all of Macintosh history. He just literally just took a wrecking ball and said, none of your software is going to work. Spaceship Warlock doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Total Distortion doesn't work anymore. And it totally shocked my world because this was in like 98, 99. I'm like, I can't show my kids my games.
Yeah.
Not only that, my whole way of organizing was based around the Macintosh Finder, where you could color, you could pile, you could say, oh, here's all the good sound files, here's all the good graphics. And I'd look through them and go, oh, this is in the maybe pile. And I would literally just move icons around in a big window.
Yeah.
And over the years, I gathered ways of like looking at my whole project and sorting the details and trying to make sense of them like maps on a page. And I had this way of organizing. And I also had quick keys and a bunch of other stuff. I was super fast. I could move things around. I could get things done. And here came a wrecking ball that just wiped it all away, destroyed all my files, all my file things wouldn't open, and all of my just wrecked it. And that's when I realized, like, I don't think, and I haven't really, I did a few little games, but I never wanted to do games again because it was like, it's just dust, the software just dust that crumbles into pieces. And I was like, okay, well, at least the audio files still play, at least the video files still play. So I started thinking, like, I'm going to do stuff that's going to last us, going to stand the test of time, because this is too shaky, this software stuff. That's what I thought at the time. It changed. It was devastating to see that just crumble.
Oh yeah.
And it came back to some degree, but
it's kind of the ephemeral nature of some of this hobby and all of that. And I think that's why archival efforts are super important. Emulation is super important, especially clock accurate emulation. So that way that you can either, or hopefully we're going to get to the point with FPGAs and things like that we get to that simulation.
Yeah, I think it's going to all come back. It's going to be great. I mean, we're going to be able to resurrect all these things, and this will be fixed. But for a while there, it's like, well, I mean, right now history is just being erased constantly. People's webs. I started noticing it in the 90s where websites would go down. You're like, wait a minute, that whole thing is gone. It's really gone. Well, the web archive might have some piece of it.
Right.
For me personally, my Wikipedia page, there used to be everything I ever did. There used to be endless photos. There used to be links out to all my. There were everything about Total Distortion. The characters. Some of the characters had their own pages.
Yeah.
Radiskull and Devil Doll, Spaceship Warlock, blah, blah, blah. All my networks, people I worked with and stuff, that used to be richly on Wikipedia. And I would go back to it and one thing would be missing and another thing would be missing. I haven't looked at it in a while, but the last time I looked, it says this character, this person maybe should not even have a Wikipedia page. Literally at the top, you go to me, I'm on Wikipedia. Maybe this person doesn't even need to be stored. It literally says that on top of the page. It's like, what are you running short on file space here?
I know.
I thought, well, this is the archive of history, not what you think of history today.
Right.
It's like, dude, there's endless space. What are you talking about? And like, I used to go like, look, there's your dad, all this stuff. And it's just a paragraph. It's like literally dustbin in a place. It's the encyclopedia. You're not supposed to dustbin history.
Right. I think that a lot of that stuff, there's been this move to sort of reclassify and kind of like stratify some of those things. And I know
erase history is what it is. They're literally erasing history. They don't like that part of history.
Sure.
So they wreck it and they just erase it.
Yeah.
It's happening all the time. That's the sinister part. There's the things where people just didn't pay their web hosting bill.
Yes.
And they lost it. That's what happened to me at Pop Rocket. I lost track of it. I was doing something else. And I got, to an email account that I wasn't checking.
Right. Yeah. So the notifications are coming in.
Like, I let it go. I just let it go. And I'm sure that happened to thousands of people. But then there's the systematic like de-Googling of history where like things that I used to search for are no longer there anymore. And not because they don't exist. You can find them. They just, no, you don't need to have these in your search results. So you have mass manipulation of history and people's minds. It's literally 1984, of course. But it's been happening for a long time.
Yes, I agree with this assessment, sir. I will say that Moby Games has done a good job of archiving a lot of things that have been projects you've worked on and things that are kind of important in terms of like gaming history and stuff. But that's one tiny part of this big story. And I think that's why it's important. It's like I can point at like a big pile of Macintoshes behind me and how, you know, everybody's got their machines archived. It's great. We're at the point where we need to be getting those stories and getting things out in multiple places so that way that it's harder to obfuscate the past.
Yeah. And you know, there was a lot of value, you know, just thinking more broadly while you were talking, I was thinking about like the metaphors that we've learned along the way. You know, we're like as through the act of playing these games, making the games, thinking about it, using tools and failing and bumping up against limitations, it's changed our brains in the way we think about things. And I think this whole period right now, which seems like, you know, 40 years to us, but it's just a blip in the history, but it's such a concentrated blip of history where people have thought of thinking and about tools and about who we are and what we're doing. Like it's been a real evolution. I think mentally computers have helped us model things and think about things in ways that we wouldn't normally do.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, this history is even more important. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
As everyone thinks, you know, their part of history is even more important. But I think from just a evolving standpoint, the metaphors we have are so rich in the modeling that we have, the idea of a computer and software, just the idea of software running in hardware. You know, it's like a spirit inhabiting a body. It's like it's a way of thinking about things, you know.
I get it. I agree. The ephemeral nature of computers and things like that. I know that you've not just like PCs or Macintoshes or these other platforms and stuff that you developed for. I know that you've done a lot of work with like console gaming. You worked for Leapfrog for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of on the Leapster handheld. Did you have any interesting things? Because that's one of those experiences where it's like it's a cartridge and you get the thing and it is the thing. It's kind of hard to like change it. So I mean, that stuff is still out there though. But,
right. I did a number of games for EA on the Genesis and other things, console games, but I was primarily an artist. So I was a really good 3D guy at the time. I lost that ability. I tried to regain it several times along the way, and I still am okay at 3D, but I used to be so good. I used to be just one of the, I mean, when I was doing Swivel for audiences, I would just like, oh, let's build a chair. Let's put it in a room. Let's move some windows. And I'd just be like, it was like muscle memory. I was young and I had, you know, I just developed like a keyboard player. I didn't even think about it. I just made stuff. Well, I lost that one. That was one of the things that went with Steve Jobs returning to Apple. Bye-bye to my 3D modeler that I was so good at. It no longer worked. And oh man, it was devastating. In fact, that's when I went to Flash. I was like, geez, what am I going to do for 3D? I'm trying to find a way back into 3D. And I ended up doing this Flash stuff. And I was like, this 2D is actually kind of fun. Like the 2D, it's like a whole different way of thinking and you can cheat and do tricks. And I got really into doing 2D cartoons. And then that was probably, I mean, Radiskull and Devil Doll, I would be in a place and someone would have a tattoo of next. I was in Amsterdam and I looked next to me and someone had a Devil Doll tattoo on their arm. I ran into these people. People would send me tattoos of the characters and remixes of the songs and stuff like that. And that for a brief period, the thing is though, the tragedy side of my life, of which there's quite a bit, was that at the peak fame and audience where I had 1 million people a month in the early days of the internet, not today. Yeah. We're saying in year 2000, I had 1 million people a month coming. I was getting 350 emails per day.
Wow.
Per day. I'm just like scrolling. There's like endless art and people sharing. And at the height of that fame, the .com crash happened. And they're like, oh, you got to go. We all got to go. We don't know what we're going to do. And they closed down shockwave.com that I had been working on for 4 years. And that's where I did. So then I'm on my own. That's when I ended up at Leapfrog because I was really good at Flash. I'm like, what do I do? The .com crash was so serious. You had no idea what it was like. It was like all this activity and then boom, Nothing. Like everyone's like, what's happening? They just shut it all down. And so I was, wondering what to do with myself. My company, of which I had a lot of shares in, was now closed, and I didn't know what was happening. And I was cut off from all the Macromedia people, and no one was telling me anything. And I didn't know what to do at that point. And I started looking around, and I ended up going to Leapfrog, because they were creating a new Game Boy type thing called the Leapster. And I spent about a year working on games for that. And I made a game where you pose a character and you pose them into keyframes. And, old theme with mine. You had a character and it had inverse kinematics, so you could lift the hand, the whole arm would move, and you could turn the body. And so you could kind of push it around, and then you'd go keyframe, and then you'd push it over here, keyframe. And you would do this, and then you hit play, and then it'd start going between your keyframes. It was a real-time music video with sprites, just like the Total Distortion thing. And I did that for a while, but it was a big company over in Emeryville. It was very strange for me. One funny story about that is I'd been working by myself for so long, even at Macromedia. I did most of my work right here. And I had developed, I never cursed like in high school growing up. I never said, F you or whatever like that. Like in earnestly, oh my God damn. I never said that. It was only the working through computers that I had developed a terrible swearing thing. Like, God damn you, God damn you. I'm like constantly talking, don't you dare do that. Like this. Now I'm at Leapfrog, and I'm sitting in this big cubicle area with little kids going by to the testing rooms, like literally a trail of kids going by, and I'm like, motherfuckers, goddamn, like this. I was like, oh shit, what am I gonna do? What am I fucking gonna do?
Listen, so they drove to Emeryville. They knew what they were in for.
Right. Well, I started doing and it stuck with me to this day, although I let it slip a little bit. I started saying, you dirty rat, you dirty rat. And so, because of these kids walking around my skull, I'd be like, dirty rats, dirty rats. And I just said it was like something from an old movie. Oh, you dirty rats, you dirty rats. Yes. I just said dirty rats, and now it's stuck with me. Now the whole family says dirty rats, and it was Leapfrog was where dirty rats came from.
That's hilarious. That's but no, I understand. It's a different environment, it's with your the focus group people. But again, they drove.
There's actually a video of me at Emeryville. I just had to suddenly remember. I even posted it on my YouTube channel. Someone sent me a video of me doing Radiskull and Devil Doll at an Emeryville. Oh yeah, a Leapfrog family day. And they set up a thing, and people played guitar and stuff. And I got there. I am the Radiskull, and I will kill you all. And I just performed an a cappella version of Radiskull, and they really liked it.
That's funny.
With all the kids over there.
Yeah, they kids love that. Alt humor kind of 90s derivative. Yeah, I get it. What a world that this is all built. That's for sure. But
yeah.
As part of, you've had this amazing career. You've done all this computer stuff. You worked at NASA. You've worked at Google. You've worked everywhere. When you were at NASA, what were some of the things that you were?
Man. Okay, so again, I was pretty young, and it was great. I was a contractor for NASA, but I learned so much about working for the government and how it all works. One of the things is when I would go to the NASA campus, which is now Google, by the way, the NASA Ames, at least the hangars are rented by Google. So there's these massive hangars you can see from space that are spaceship hangars, basically. NASA Ames Research is right next door to Google, down there at the bottom of the bay, at Silicon Valley, Sunnyvale area, and Moffett Field. So I used to have to go there once a week. So I would pack up my computer in my trunk, and I would go down there to meet rocket scientists who were working on this mission to Mars team.
Yeah.
And I would get two guys with machine guns would ask me to open my trunk, and they would search my car, and they would check my badge, and they would call an office, and then they'd let me in. So that was coming to work.
Yeah.
Was there were literally two guys with machine guns. Then I would go inside, And they're like, oh, we're down in this hall. And I would go past all these little offices, and everyone had their own private office, or at least 2 to 1 office. There were like these long hallways, and you'd walk by and you see guys on computers. You'd see like maybe 2 guys in a room with computers. And they're all leaning in the computer like that. And I'd walk past one after another and another. I'm like, wait a minute, they're all doing the same thing. What is it? Oh, they're playing a network game. Really? Yeah, they're playing a network game. I'm like, oh yeah. And this isn't like 1990. I'm going through and they're playing some kind of crude network game on the NASA network. Now, I was employed by Sterling Software, which was, it turns out, is this giant campus that handles just the consultants working for NASA. And there's a huge office building that does nothing. They don't make software. They don't do anything. They just find people that NASA wants to hire and hires them and manages their contract for NASA. So I was working for Sterling Software. It turns out they're all over at every NASA campus. And I mean, what I found, honestly, to tell you the truth, I mean, I from my experience, I could be wrong, but it's basically all the work at NASA is done by people that get hired to do the work, while the people over there may be doing a little bit of network gameplay on the office computers here and there, as I saw,
Well, it's in
over
the
and
old
over
days,
again.
Yeah, in the old days, we called that stress testing. We're stress testing the network.
There we go. Yeah, we did an awful lot of network game playing at Pop Rocket. In fact, at one point we heard, one of the biggest competitive edge that other game developers have is getting other developers addicted to their games, because they'll wreck their productivity.
Yeah.
It certainly happened to us. Then in the middle of some really stressful times at Pop Rocket, we were playing, what was the other one out there? Pathways into Darkness. There were several. Marathon. We played the hell out of Marathon. And I met the Bungie guys and all that back then during the Warlock days. I remember meeting all those guys, and they would all completely, like Duke Nukem just completely destroyed us. I mean, it's like we were taking off, and then Duke Nukem came in and some other things, and it was like, that's it, man. Nobody wants this slow ass like 2D puzzle-y activity. They just want to freaking fly through the air and shoot. And it was really exhilarating, and we loved it too. I loved Duke Nukem, and I loved Quake and all those things, and played the hell out of them. They were a lot of fun.
I will tell you though that a lot has happened. That yes, that there was a time where first-person shooters absolutely took everything over, but it's like we are now, like, we're in kind of getting back into a golden age of like adventure gaming and kind of these what people like cozy game experience, things like that. So I mean, it's there are people that are releasing like there's a game that's called the Crimson Diamond that is a like an adventure game that looks like one of those old Laura Bow Sierra games from back, like
Sierra
SyQuest or something.
I remember
that stuff's coming out now.
I know,
old point and click adventure games and stuff. It's the iron is hot.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be some cool things. I really think that where we're heading now is we don't have the words for it right now. They're like games, they're like movies, they're going to be interesting experiences is what I think. You've probably seen Google is really doing incredible stuff with the AI stuff right now. I think they have come back and they're kind of like at the top of the AI experience right now. They're really near the top, or one of the biggest movers in all the things I've seen. And one of their latest things is like they take an image and they'll just extrapolate a whole world in it, and it's a world that you can walk around in, and it's really nice. But those kinds of ideas where I'm going to do things in a world that's being generated from a lot of clues. Those clues could be old adventure games. Those clues could be anything. So I think we're going to remix. We're going to have a new palette that doesn't fit what we think of as video or video games or 3D worlds. It'll be something else, but it'll borrow from all those things, and it'll be just a rich, interactive world. So I spend a lot of time trying to think of what we're all going to be doing in this future world. And I think we will be probably riffing on our past and coming up with ways to improve it. So we'll just take all these experiences, and we don't even know what it is yet. Like what people always do with AI right now, you just like, I'm going to make a car chase. I'm going to make things I've seen before. I'm just going to see, oh, look, I did what they did. And it's like, there's a lot of repeating what you've seen and what you've basically your basic programming. And, but I think we're going to find ways to break out of those constraints. It's hard to put into words what it is, but I imagine that like you'll have some ideas. Like say you were just sitting there and you're thinking, I really wonder what it was really like to play this game on a original Macintosh, and boom, here it is. And you've got the original Macintosh, and this does a faithful representation of just give me a clue of what a good player would play this at, for 5 minutes. I want to see what it's like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. And someone will be able to do that. And you'll go like, you know what if we, did Dracula in this style? Or what if we did, this style? I love this style, the creepy castle style. How about show me, Casablanca famous scene in the creepy castle style. And you're like, that's really cool. Maybe there's a world here. And you just kind of drift and you come up, is there something good here that I should develop? And you'll kind of like have a partner that has ability to look through your photos. Like I think I have one of the reasons I have 30 terabytes is I have every image or video or thing, not only all my projects, but I have everything since the beginning of cameras being good, which was 1998, one of these Sony cameras. Finally, you actually had a practical digital camera that didn't take forever. It actually worked. And from that 1998 to now, I have terabytes of movies of every place I've been, what I thought, things I've written about. It's a nightmare even just to look at them. It's like going to a closet and opening a box and what's in this box? Oh, my first concert and this, that, and the other. I think eventually we'll have our own personal AI that not only scrapes everything we've ever done and our nearest neighbors and friends in the world, and we will have that to kind of piece together new things. Like, for example, I would like to play, Laura Croft in my 8th grade, Lincoln High School in Taft, California. And it can actually use historical records to put together that scene with actual characters from your life walking around saying, hey, Joe, what are you doing out of class? You're supposed to be down. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
The kind of riffing we can do on history and all the stuff that we've built so far that we've held on to. Like, okay, robot, scan my closet, please. Like this, I have a closet so filled with stuff from photos to hard drives. I'd love to have a robot come in here and just like take it all apart and reconstruct it like an archaeologist and present it to me in a way that I can use. It would be really, really interesting to be able to kind of just have a kind of one of those experiences where you could just kind of go through and an easy way to have all those memories and access to that media and mix it and match it however you want. And then it says, here's where your mental, here's where all your problems began. You know what? You held on to this bad idea right here. That stupid teacher gave you the wrong idea and you ran with it for 10 years. And if you'd only known, we could have changed history here. And you go like, war game, what would happen if I had not made that stupid mistake?
Well, I think all your mistakes have been amazing so far, and I'm always looking forward to what you're doing next. But Joe, where can people find you online?
Well, right now, I mean, my website is in disrepair. I'm hoping AI is going to help me fix that. I went to a blog thing and there's a lot of stuff there. If you go to joesparks.com/Radiskull, it'll take you to my very old site, which is pretty much the way it was since, early 2000s. But where I am now actually publishing all the new little AI experiments I'm doing is on X, formerly Twitter. It's x.com/joesparks. And you can see the latest things I'm doing right now, which is trying to make consistent characters that persist in videos and lip syncing and making people talk and do things. I'm completely into it. One of the cool things that's happening right now today in San Francisco, same old place that it's been happening, is there's companies like Comfy UI, comfy.org, that make this AI toolkit. They don't necessarily make any AI themselves. They just made this cool toolkit where you can load models that come from other people And other people make all kinds of tools, just like those HyperCard X commands that allowed us to play Spaceship Warlock sounds and chain them together. There's somebody making these little X commands that, like, you know, filter the models a certain way, tell it to ignore something that's slowing it down, and feed it into a rich, you know, extract things out of other images to use, like extract skeletal information, poses, and then use that pose in something else. So right now, your video camera, your microphone, you can start acting for characters. So like if I was doing Spaceship Warlock today, I could make a robot, or I could make an alien, and I could sit there and make his little moves. It goes like that, and it will take, you know, with the right tools, you can act out all your characters, the voice, change your voice, your actual action. That's what I'm in right now, is trying to make little movies using these new tools, and it's changing every day and constantly upgrading. And a lot of it's happening right here in San Francisco. There's a lot of little companies. It feels like a very vibrant, it feels like the late 80s, the HyperCard, multimedia, interactive multimedia, a lot of people getting excited about what you can do with computers again. And that's happening right now. And so I'm into it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I will make sure I'll have links in the description for everybody. You can follow up and see what Joe's working on this week. Joe, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday.
Oh, and, thank you so much for having me over.
Talking about the old days. So thank you, sir.
I appreciate it so much. And it was fun talking to you. Take care. I'll talk to you again.